Hello, Dallas. It's time to wake up and get wealthy. I'm Terri Arends, and today's topic, we are going to talk about holistic self-care. I am here with Dr. Steve Hines, and I'd like to thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And holistic self-care, it seems like when you take the word holistic and you take the word self-care, that can cover a lot of ground. So why don't you explain to our viewers what is holistic self-care?
Sure. Good morning, JCC. It is indeed a very broad topic. And in a nutshell, the way I define it is compassionate and practical, whole body, whole person self-care.
Okay. So I know we were talking, I think after class one day, and you had mentioned that when you really take a deep dive into this, that there's a lot of different elements or different categories for holistic self-care. How many categories are there, would you say?
Well, again, this is my own recipe that I have developed over about 50 years of being a doctor.
Wow.
But I've broken it down into 6 elements, and they are move, eat with intention, touch and be touched, create joy, acknowledge our fundamental spirituality, and when needed, partner with a doctor or healthcare provider.
Okay, that's a lot. Those, it sounds like and all of those different categories are really extra special in regards to how you can create that self-care for yourself. So let's talk a little bit about, I think the first one you mentioned was move.
Right.
So what do you mean by move? When I think of move, you know what I think? I think of like just moving and exercising. So is that what you mean?
Well, I think move, I intentionally use the term move versus exercise. When you look at the blue zones of the world, and these are areas of the world where people routinely live to be 100 or older, you look at what these people do. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, these societies don't really exercise in the sense that we call it, but they move actively all day long. They walk almost everywhere, which includes a lot of hills in some of these countries. They cook, they garden, they wash clothes. They're often intergenerational families, so the old folks take care of the babies. And those of you with kids and small babies know how active that is. So they're active, they're on the go. And that is a critical piece of good self-care.
Okay. So just moving about in your everyday life, I guess, is what you're
right.
You're
and for those of us, I mean, many of us do have the opportunity for structured exercise, which to me is very valuable. This woman I'm sitting with has a strength defined class, and it's interesting, and I've noticed and paid attention, she talks about a lot of the movement we do in her class as preparing us for daily activities, such as picking up packages, reaching to the top shelf, things like that, which we do routinely. And I appreciate that you do comment about that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Yes. So I think we mentioned there are 6 different elements.
Right.
And so I believe the second one you mentioned was eat with intention. Now, eating with intention, what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, you notice the word diet is not there.
Yes, I did notice that.
On purpose.
Thank you,
yes.
By the way. I appreciate that. As a wellness director, I appreciate you're not saying the D-I-E-T.
Well, diet has a beginning and an end. And often it's a very artificial way of putting stuff into our mouth. Very low calorie, often very low calorie, often very skewed in one direction. And what often happens when people complete
So out of the 6 elements, Dr. Steve, you mentioned that the third element is touch or to be touched. That sounds a little complicated in today's world. Would you mind explaining?
Sure.
I'll hand off.
Well, for good reason. I mean, we're still in the COVID era, but it has lessened tremendously. But you all know what that's done to our concept of touch, especially the safety of our hands. So beyond that, there's the whole question of healthy, consensual touch and boundaries. So I'm talking about healthy affection that is felt on both sides. And, you know, when I think about touch and be touched, I'm thinking about a hug, holding hands, just the warmth that we get from touch. You know, there are plenty of scientific studies that show that touch deprived people and other animals have major problems with increased hostility versus studies that show scientifically that just simply holding a person's hand when they feel you are a friendly associate can decrease their level of pain perception. It increases the healthy feel-good hormones in our bodies. It decreases our stress hormone. They're just, and of course, the local benefits of something like massage that actually warms and softens muscles is well known to all of us who've had a good massage.
That's so true. That's so true. It does, and it increases your circulation, and I guess also those endorphins that are released by just having that, you know, general light touch or even just a handshake can be a feel good.
Yeah, our feel good hormones, the endorphins.
Yes, lovely. Yes, and I think number big 4 on your list, number 4 out of 6, and number 4 on your list was create joy. And I think we hear that term a lot, create joy. It almost in some ways can sound a little cliche.
Yeah.
Create joy. So how do we create joy? Tell us. I want to know.
Well, I break it down into a few elements just that I have experienced myself and that I've seen in others. Enjoy our senses, which often requires an intentional time out from the pace that we put ourselves in day after day. For example, this time of year, if you walk outside and just be still and be present to smells, you may very well smell magnolias in bloom all over Dallas right now.
Wow.
Take time out and look at the sky. I mean, it's gorgeous and it's there every day. And how often we rush into our next task and don't even pay attention to the joy that the blue sky or the gray sky or the cloudy sky can give us. Mindful, intentional activities that we know we enjoy. Play and be playful. You don't have to give up play as an adult. And, you know, just those are 3 examples specifically.
Yeah, well, I love that. You know, just take a moment, get outside. So remember, if you're working, when you're at work and you're inside, maybe you don't have a window in your office, take a moment to just go outside, get some fresh air. Sounds like a really healthy idea. And in addition to that, you were saying about play. Well, I know as far as being the group fitness director, I always encourage our instructors to incorporate when it'll work within the format, some type of play activity. For example, we've done that before in class where we just end as a community and create various types of play elements. So I always notice when I do add those elements, they're just like biggest smiles heading out the door, and it's like we brought them back for a moment to their positive childhood days.
Yes.
So
And
it's nice.
remember, I mean, that's one of the elements of creating joy too, which is socializing. So we are social creatures. We thrive on relationship and community. So if you can combine play with something like fun exercise, which includes the music, by the way,
Oh, of
then
course.
it's a win-win-win.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Okay, so then I remember you were saying like your fifth point, and this one seems like a little odd or not as familiar maybe for people would be just to acknowledge fundamental spirituality.
Acknowledge our fundamental
Yeah,
spirituality.
so how do you
Yeah, that
move
may
forward with that?
seem foreign, even controversial to a lot of folks. There's a wonderful quote by Deepak Chopra. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And I love that because when I'm thinking about spirituality, I'm thinking there are two questions that in my work as a hospice physician, we really dwell on with patients and their families as they are nearing the end of life. And one is, where do you draw your strength? And the second is, what gives your life meaning? And I think those are core spiritual elements that are in all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we really pay attention to them and then work toward living in a way that lives into the answers to those, we enrich our lives. So it's not being religious, it's being spiritual. Although those of you who have a strong faith community know that that may be the answer to one or both of those questions.
Nice. And you know, that's the one thing, community, camaraderie, and cohesiveness. And you can find that in many various venues. So that's even here at the JCC, we have a really strong community. And that does, it seems like that just, you know, falls back into a few of the other elements. So it seems like all these elements are sort of run together and they all kind of come full circle.
Absolutely. I go to Terri's class, and as I laugh and tell her, she makes me sore. Then the next day I go to Marco's restorative yoga and get restored, get stretched out, get enriched. You know, and that touches to the spiritual core as well, because he's very intentional about being mindful of going in and tapping into your spiritual nature.
Well, I'm glad that Marco and I can create a nice balance.
Right, you're helping my holistic self-care.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Now, it's interesting because you saved, I guess, the best for last, which will be point number 6. And that was basically to partner with a doctor. And I'm not sure why you saved this one for last, but, you know, partnering with your provider, with your healthcare doctor. In this day and age, though, when you said that, I was thinking, our docs seem like that they're so busy, and you're one yourself, so maybe you can attest with that. Is it in this day and age? Is it still? Are we able to do that? Like, you know, you can't really have a long sit down because it's like the next patient is in. It seems like. So, how do you go about this? What are some tips you have?
Well, folks, I added up the number of hours in a year, and it's 8,760. If you think about the time that you physically spend with your healthcare provider or doctor a year, and I just sort of worked with the numbers a little bit, and I thought, well, if somebody sees a doctor 12 times a year, that's a lot. And then if you spend 2 hours in the doctor's office per visit, now again, that's not with the doctor, as you pointed out, because you all know that in the 2-hour doctor visit, you may spend 15 minutes or less with the doctor.
Quick.
The rest of the year, who do you spend with? We spend it with ourselves. So when you think about who's really in charge of our health care, it's us.
I love that.
Partnering with the doctors, and I do mean that intentionally, you really have to state to your healthcare providers, or I would encourage you. I realize that I'm the main one in charge of my healthcare. I rely on medicines you give me. I rely on therapies. I rely on your advice. But then I know I've got to take that and take care of myself. So I want to see our relationship as a partnership.
Nice. I agree that like everybody really needs to drive their own bus when it comes to healthcare, and to find, and do some research on who you want, through your provider, who it is that you're going to select. And maybe, it can be one of those things where you take a little extra time to move to that direction, instead of just like, oh, okay, I'm going to call this person or email this person, get into their system, where you do a little homework on your end. I think that's really important.
Well, it's really interesting, folks. If you look at the history of medicine in the world, thousands of years ago in China, in India, and even Hippocrates, who we consider the father of modern medicine, who was in Greece, emphasized balance. And what are we talking about today? We're talking about the balance of holistic self-care. So what changed all this? Honestly, a big factor was the discovery of germs. Because when germs were discovered under a microscope, or when the researchers saw that they could take this from a diseased animal or person and inject it in another, that it would cause that disease, then we started looking for cure me, not balance me. And so the shift really went very far toward the cure me element. And I think a lot of people thought in their own body and in their own person, it's gone a little too far. I need to go back and take some control myself. And so that's where the holistic self-care movement has really gotten a lot of energy, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Your points are so well driven, because in this day and age, absolutely, wellness and health have changed. I mean, it has gone in new directions, and that includes to bring in things like the holistic self-care and the points that you have referenced today. So do you have any other takeaways for our viewers? Anything to drive home?
Well, one thought I'd just like to leave you all with, one of my childhood idols who remains someone I revere greatly, is Albert Schweitzer. He was born in the late 1800s, but actually lived until 1965. And he was a Renaissance man. He was a theologian, he was a physician, he was a philosopher, and he moved to the west coast of Africa in around probably 1930, and established a hospital there, and wrote many wonderful books, or at least a few wonderful books. But one quote that he said, that as I was a child and contemplating a career as a physician, he said, "We physicians are at our best when we acknowledge the doctor that resides in every patient." And so I would encourage everyone to think of the doctor that resides in them, and to let that doctor bloom, let that doctor be a major force in the way they live their lives and the wellness goals that they establish.
That's nice. Thank you. That's a good point to conclude on. And I really appreciate you for coming in today. And for you guys at home, remember, when you wake up, it's time to wake up and get wealthy. I'm Terri Arends, Group Fitness and Wellness Director here at the Arends Family JCC. We'll see you next time. Thank you.